All right, good morning and good morning. It is 11 o'clock, and I am Dr. King coming at you from 800 Link here in Texas. I have started my series last week. We started talking about going off to college, preparing our graduating seniors, future incoming freshmen, whether they're going to summer school or this fall, and getting them ready to send them off to college. Parents, I know I have one that's going as well, and I'm keeping my mind busy, but my heart is breaking because I have to take my baby to college in August. And but anyway, we're going to talk today about the differences in staying in a regular dorm room versus staying in what they call a living learning community. And you guys have heard me talk about the living learning communities a little bit last week, and then I've talked about them in the past. But we're going to talk about the two today, and go from there. So, excuse me, most colleges and universities, when your child enrolls, he or she is going to be required to live in what they call a living learning community, or live on, excuse me, not a living learning community, live in a dorm. Most freshmen, there are very few colleges that do not require incoming freshmen to live on campus in the dorms, because they want them to get used to not being at home, not being up under mom and dad, nobody getting them up. They're not adults, but they're transitioning into adulthood, and they need to be taught how to get themselves up and ready for school, and for class, and how to do their own laundry and all of that good stuff. So a lot of colleges and universities require incoming freshmen to live on campus. Some don't. My daughter's college actually doesn't. The university that she will be attending does not require it, but she will be. They do have dorms on campus, but it's not a requirement that freshmen live on campus. But I want her to. I want her to experience being a college student. I did it, and it's wonderful, and I want her to experience that as well. So let's talk about the differences between a regular dorm and a living learning community. A regular dorm is just that. If you've ever gone off to college and lived on campus, you lived in a dorm. Normally dorms are separated by gender. There are very few that have what they call co-ed dorms. Most dorms are separated, all girls, all boys. They do. Some have family dorms where students are married and need someone to live, their spouses, and if they have children, can live with them on campus, or they have apartment complexes designated for that around campus. Um, but a dorm room is just that. It's a dorm room. You go in there. There's two beds in there. You're going to have a sink, it's a closet, it's a dorm room. And your more modern ones, they have apartment complexes that have suites, that a lot of times it's going to be four girls living in one room, and they all share one bathroom. And then like, the bathroom is in the center, and on both sides you have the dorm rooms with two beds each in each one. The one that my daughter is going to be living in, theirs is actually a little apartment style. You come in, there's a little living area. There's three different rooms. So there's three girls to a room. Each girl's going to have their own room. They're going to have their own sink, but they share one area with a toilet, and then there's one area that has the shower. They don't have a bathtub. But so it's like dorm rooms are a little fancy now. They're not old like when I was in college. Um, when I went to Baylor and went to UT Permian Basin and lived on campus, and we had um going to the room, one bed on one side, one bed on the other side. We had a closet. We had a little area with a little cabinet area, and then a sink, and then we both had desks and things like that. So it's like dorm rooms, just they're designed all kind of ways differently, and everything, but they're all designed to do one thing: give a university or college students somewhere to live while they study and work on their degree. Most often dorm rooms, once again, like I said, are going to come with roommates, whether you have one, whether you have three, four to a room, or just one to a room. It's very seldom you'll have in the incoming freshman dorms um one person to a room. If they do, this because mom and dad had a little money and they were able to make that happen. But most often in freshman dorms, you're going to have at least two to four girls. There's always going to be at least one, but at least two to four girls are going to be in one dorm room. It's going to be communal showers. Old school dorms, they have the shower is down the hall. Everybody that lives on that end of the hall has that one shower, one bathroom area, have like 4 or 5 different toilets. They have 4 or 5, 6 separate showers. It's basically being in a locker room. There are no lockers in there, but as think about a locker room, how they have the showers set up in there, how they have the different sinks, different mirrors. That's kind of what a communal shower is in a dorm. New school, like I said, the new school dorms are beautiful. They're designed like apartments. Like I said, most often you're going to have 2 to 4 girls sharing one shower, one toilet. They may have sinks. Like I said, my daughter's dorm each girl is going to have their own sink. But, they're trying to get it away from being communal, because communal, that's where you get your strep viruses and streptococcal diseases and spreading all different types of things. So universities and dormitories, they're called dormitories, are getting away from having the communal showers where you have more than 4 girls sharing one bathroom together. You're spreading viruses and bodily fluids and bacterias and things like that. Yeah, get away from that. But and then, like I said, most often your dorms are going to be gender based. You're going to have all girls in one dorm, all boys in one dorm. There are very few freshman dorms that are co-ed. Why? Because they're freshmen. There's a maturity level there. So they're going to want you to not do those things, with the incoming freshman. It takes maturity. It's like living in an apartment complex, but you don't want anything going on that's going to have mom and dad at the university suing because something happened to their son or daughter. So most often your dorms are going to be gender based. And then, but now you have dorms like at the university my daughter's going to. We'll talk about the LLCs, but they also have areas of the dorms that LGBTQ, students live, and that's fine. Hey, they have areas where, like I said, you have the family areas where students that are families are married and have families live. That's fine. People come in. We're diverse people. We are diverse, and we want to live. Everybody wants to live and do what they want to do and still be able to get their degrees. You see, I have Rainbow Jenkins back there to my LGBTQ, friends and family. It's Pride Month. Hey, I am married, but I still have friends that I love dearly who are wonderful to me. And so what? They happen to be gay or lesbian or whatever the new terms are. Trying to learn them because they keep changing. Y'all, come on now. But just everything. I'm just glad that we can do things. Oh, my phone's ringing. Y'all remember, I'm not used to doing my presentations in the mornings now. So all of my friends, I have to, are learning that Tuesday mornings I'm busy, but it's fine. But, it's just, universities, they have areas for handicapped students now, either mentally or physically disabled students. Dormitories are coming in so many things. It's not now, just girls and boys. They're splitting up areas of dorms. And that's where we come with the LLCs, living learning communities. Living learning communities are there's areas of the dormitory. If some schools have a lot of students and they have a lot of students in their LLCs, they may have a whole dormitory building devoted just to that. But a lot of times an LLC is really just a certain wing of a dorm where the students that are all majoring in the same major live together. They all live on one end of a hall together, or an area of a dorm together. They take certain classes together. They study together. They have events. Sometimes the major, the professors and things will put on study groups and things like that, and those students are required to go to those things. And so the living learning community, they have found, is a way to increase and ensure that students are graduating on time. In a regular dorm, there's nobody there. There's nobody there. You just have the RA, the resident assistant, and then you have the person that runs the whole dorm. But there's nobody ensuring that the kids are getting up, going to class, registering for the right classes, doing their homework. Once again, yes, they're 18, but these are still, for the most part, these are our babies. And they still need that guidance. They still need that advice, that when they go off to college, mom and dad's not, on their backs and all of that type of things, but they still need guidance, whether they tell you or not. They do. They do. And so in the living learning communities, colleges have started these where, like, my daughter's in engineering, so she's going to live in the biomedical engineering LLC. And so everybody that's going to live with her in her dorm roommates are going to all be biomedical engineering majors. They all had to register for certain classes that they will take together. And I mean, it's everybody. It's not just my daughter and her two roommates. It's going to be, the other girls that are living in the LLC as well, or young ladies living in the LLC as well. They're going to all take certain biomedical engineering classes together. Um, they're going to study together, things like that. So they make sure that they stay on track. When you have a support system, and college students need that, when you have that support system, you're helping each other, you're pulling each other along and helping each other, and hopefully you will all graduate on time together. And then like I said, they will attend study groups together. They will go to uh, LLC events. So like I said, my daughter's in biomedical engineering. So if the biomedical engineering department does things, my daughter and her roommates and all the other BME LLC members will attend those things, attend the study groups, sometimes eat dinner together, eat lunch together. They're trying to ensure that these students they have a support system. They're able to talk to each other and learn things together. If somebody is not understanding something and somebody does understand something, there's that tutoring aspect there. So they're there and they have each other to rely and depend on to get through these classes, and hopefully they will all walk in 4 years together or earlier, if they have it done. Regular dormitory, unfortunately, you don't have that. Now, granted, you do have some students, they may find out, just from when they send out the information telling you who your dorm mate is going to be and all of that type of things, and you guys meet each other, and talk and figure out color schemes and all that for the dorm room, what you're going to have in your dorm. You will talk and determine what your majors are going to be. Hopefully you will get someone that is your same major when you live in a regular dorm, but that's not always the case. With the living learning community, that is the case. The requirement is that in order for you to be in that living learning community, you have to be in that major. And there are living learning communities for all different types of majors. You just have to find out whether or not the university that you or your child will be attending actually does the living learning communities in their dorms. And then if they do, what majors do they provide the LLCs for? It's, um, university may have 200 majors, but they may not have 200 LLCs. They may only have 10 for the big majors. They're majors that most students go there and declare. So find out what majors that the university that you or your child will be attending, if they have the LLCs, and you would apply to live in an LLC just like you would apply to live in a dorm. Part of when my daughter applied to live in a dorm, one of the questions was, would you like to live in an LLC? And you click check yes or no. She clicked check. She clicked yes, and then the LLCs that are optional to live in, a whole list of them popped up. She had to find her major and click the box. And so if the major is not there, then I think there was an option for them to put in there, if your major is not there, what major do you have? So then if they have enough students in certain majors that are not already on the list, maybe they need to start an LLC for that major. Makes sense? So that's how we did that. We just applied for a dorm, and then one of the questions was, would you like to live in an LLC? My daughter clicked yes. She chose her major, and then we went from there. And then you find out, we found out down the line that she was accepted to live in the dorm as well as accepted to live in the LLC. It's kind of two different acceptances. So, and then we'll find out in July who our dorm mates are going to be. Hopefully we think we already know who they are, but we don't know. We'll find out in July, and that's perfectly fine. But it's if they have an LLC, make sure that you try to get in it, you or your child. If you're in college and you don't already have your apartment, don't already have a house, or not already living at home or whatever, and you have an option to potentially live in an LLC, then try to live in an LLC. Because it's kind of weird that for those students that I know that have gone to college after me, they find and they tend to navigate together with the students that are in their major. So it's almost common sense and normal to think that at some point they will put these students together in a dorm and say, hey, let's put these kids together and see how that happens. Somebody earned a PhD on this. Anytime something new comes out, especially when it's in an education industry, somebody has earned a PhD. This is a theory. If we put these kids together, let's see if it improves on their grades, their individual grades, and then improves on the graduation rate for that degree. I'm pretty sure somebody earned a doctorate figuring out that LLCs actually work, and that is perfectly fine. And so then with the LLCs that are different from the dorms, sometimes in the dorms you have to pick a meal plan, but it's any meal plan. With the LLCs, a lot of times they make you choose the highest meal plan, and that's to make sure that you're eating, that the kids are eating. Our brains need nourishment, so you don't want to live in a dorm and only eat one meal a day. So sometimes living in the LLC, I've seen some LLCs, doing some research where they're requiring the freshmen to, and the LLCs tend to be just for freshmen. Then they have other communities for the upper, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in college, or what you want to call, your undergrad students. But normally with the LLCs, I have only seen the designated living learning community title for the freshman dorm, the incoming freshmen. But it doesn't mean that the colleges don't have LLCs for anybody above the freshman level. It's just that for the ones that I've seen, and once again, there are thousands of universities. I couldn't research them all, but the ones that I've seen, the LLCs were only for the incoming freshmen, and then for sophomores and above, they had other communities. They weren't called living learning communities, but at the end of the day, that's what they were. Women in STEAM, men in STEAM. Things like little club type names, but at the end of the day they were really just subset living learning communities. But make sure that when you're trying to go to college, that you're doing everything that's best for you to do what you need to do, or your child do what's best for them, to make sure they have that leg up going in. Back when I was in school in the 90s, when I lived on campus in the 90s, we didn't have that support. We just had an advisor. We had an academic advisor. We had a financial aid advisor, but there was no one there guiding us. Now, granted, the resident assistant and the person that was over the residence hall, that was kind of part of their job duties. But when you have hundreds of kids that you're responsible for, or you're a resident assistant and you're only 19, 20 years old, and you have like 10, 12 different girls that you're, responsible for, it's hard to try to give that personal support that's needed sometimes. Like I tell people all the time, as a basketball coach, one thing that I've learned as a coach is that each child responds differently. There is no cookie cutter across the board style of you can coach every child the same way. It's the same thing with students in college and in high school. Every child responds differently. There are things that you have to use with them that causes them to respond and get what you need out of them. Same thing when you're living on campus as a resident assistant or a dorm manager or whatever they call them. You have to be able to know how to talk to and communicate with the people that live and are your responsibility on that campus. And so the LLCs kind of have that. It puts the kids together that are going to be majoring in the same major, taking some of the same classes, and hopefully after they register that fall and get that fall, not the fall semester, but that freshman year under their belt, maybe they will register and take some more of their classes together. The whole thing is to build on each other, to see these kids all get through to get their undergraduate degree. That's what the LLC is for. So hopefully when their freshman year, they're enrolled in their classes and realize that, hey, this is a benefit to me. So hey, y'all, we may not necessarily live on campus next year, or we may not be roommates next year, but let's all register for the same classes that we have to take for next year, and the same sections and everything. So we're once again have that support system going, and we can get through these classes and learn and graduate together. And who's to say, that at some point the dorms will spread out and do more LLCs. Maybe this is just like a little trial period that you're seeing on the campuses now. And then once again, there may be some kids who just don't want to, do that. Hey, they're okay being on their own and don't need that support system. Once again, perfectly fine. Or like I said, they may live in the LGBTQ area of the dorm, or they may live in the gender neutral area of the dorm, or may be married and live in that part of the dorm. Perfectly fine. And maybe there are little LLC communities within those areas of the dorms. It's all, stacked on top of each other, and all works together for the good of the students, and whatever it takes to make sure that these kids graduate, to get their, it's one thing to enroll in college, but the point is to graduate. Don't become a lifelong college student. If you're going to do that, make sure you're racking up some degrees in the process. Don't just take class after class after class after class and you still don't have a bachelor's degree. You know, where do they do that? Unfortunately, but there are plenty what they call career college students out there. They love to learn. And I get that because I do. But in the process of my learning, I am also going to work on my degrees. I have an associate's degree. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. I have a doctorate. But I also have so many certifications and I've taken so many classes. I've taken over 400 professional development courses, whether it's for my education degree. I've taken most of my professional development has been for teaching and coaching. But or teaching. I'm trying to get there with the coaching. I don't have as many coaching classes under my professional development belt as I do on the education side, but I am always taking classes, trying to learn something new. Times change, standard operational procedures change, teaching concepts and teaching methods change, so you don't want to be stuck doing, learning one way, but you don't want to be open to doing more things, so hopefully living learning communities will grow to encompass and become this big wide umbrella where you have all of these different majors and every major has their own LLC in the dorms, or whatnot, excuse me, or they have it to where the students all learn together, especially take the classes together, study together, attend events together, and it's happening large scale. I haven't seen so many colleges that are doing the LLCs yet, but I give it about 2 or 3, maybe 5 years at the most. And we're going to see colleges with large LLC communities because people, these universities are finding out that the LLC communities actually work in the dormitories and they have larger, and better and improved and increased graduation rates. It's all for the good of the students to see them graduate and move on to internships and starting their careers. Makes sense? So, trying to go down my list to make sure I tell y'all I write my list to make sure that I don't forget anything. And so, it's been proven, participate, roommates will declare the same major, roommates will take the classes together, and it's based on major. So yeah, so I have everything covered. So that's basically pretty much the differences between living in a regular dorm and living in an LLC. I mean, on the same token, an LLC is nothing but a dorm room. It's just they have taken apart an area of a dorm or a floor or a wing of whatever and have placed students that are all majoring in the same major together versus the regular dormitory style where you just have kids that they're say they're coming to this school, they've declared a major, they need somewhere to live because they're coming from out of town, or maybe they're not coming from out of town and just want to live on campus. And they answer questions to try to figure out to put roommates together, that kind of mesh so there are not too many problems. And so with a regular dormitory, like I said, the difference between living in a regular dorm and living in an LLC is just that in a regular dorm, the roommates are not required to have declared the same major. LLCs, they have to have the same major. Regular dormitory, they do not. LLCs most often are required to get the highest meal plan. Regular dormitories, they're not. They just have to have a meal plan. That's pretty much the difference between the two. You know, and once again, hopefully with the LLCs, the graduation rate of underclassmen are going to increase and be higher, and you won't have as many what you call career college students that are just living on campus, getting older every year but don't have a degree. Unfortunately, you do see that a lot in the regular dorms. You know, so I hope that this information has been wonderful and has helped you. If you need me, always, you know how to contact me, and I'll put it in the description as well at 800 educator Bridget at ticommunities.com. If you know me, you know where to find me, know how to call me, and can answer some questions for you, but I'm, this is June, July, kids are going to start going off to college if they're not already gone. If they're athletes, most of them that are on athletic scholarships are already gone off to school to do summer workouts and start summer school. But for those that are leaving in August, I have some more topics coming for you. We got to remember, we're talking about, mom and dad, when you guys go off to college, you got to remember mom and dad's going to be sad as well, because I know that I am. And I know that my husband is, so there are a couple of more topics. What supplies do you need for your dorm room? What supplies do you need for class? Things like that. So there are 2 more topics that I have for the month of October, the month of June, October. Wow. for the month of June as far as college topics, getting ready to go out to college. And then I'll have some more topics for everybody for July. But that is all that I have for you today. Once again, if you have any questions for me, you can always email me at 800 Educator Bridget. That's B as in boy, RID as in dog, GETTE at TICommunities.com. 800 Educator Bridget at TICommunities.com. It's been nice talking with you guys. I will see you all next Tuesday, 10 or 11. Don't remember. I, I just, I'm getting used to these morning presentations. It's taking a bit. I'm not a morning person, y'all. I'm an evening person, but it is, it is what it is, and change is a wonderful thing, and I will adapt just like I do to everything else. So I pray that you all have a wonderful week. We have so many different presentations lined up for all the resident educators and resident ambassadors and health coordinators that are part of the TI Communities Resident Professional Program. I hope that you all look at their videos and learn some things. I try to go in and look at, my coworkers. I call them my coworkers, and are they cohorts? I don't know what we want to call each other. Our fellow resident professionals. How about that? And see some topics and learn some new things. We have so much information out there to provide. And so with that being said, I will say good evening or good good evening. Good morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have fun. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay out of this heat. If you are in Texas, it is already 90 some degrees and it's not even noon yet. So, stay hydrated and do well and be well. Talk with you all next week. See you later. Bye-bye.